Okay, so good morning, everybody, wherever you are in the world. Maybe it's afternoon. Chapter 34. So if anyone has lessons in Tanya, the English translation of lessons in Tanya, this is actually the last chapter of the first book. So that's an accomplishment that we finished the first book. Chapter 34 also marks the end of a segment in Tanya regarding fighting depression and negativity, which takes us from chapter 26 to 34. And I'm going to do a brief recap to get us to the place of chapter 34, because chapter 34 is actually not a very long chapter, very powerful and very practical, like I told Sina before. So a very brief recap. In chapter 26, we began talking about material suffering as a cause for depression. A person could go through challenges in their life and suffering, and that can cause depression. Now, remember, I'm going through a very brief recap, so just very briefly touching on certain points. And chapter 26 gives us as a solution to reflect upon the fact, to realize that this suffering that we are going through is really a deeper level, comes from a deeper level of love from Hashem. And if there is perhaps a spiritual cause for the suffering, then one should only think about it in predetermined times, not the whole day, because that really comes from the Yetzer Hara. Chapter 27 spoke to the mission of the Beinoni. In other words, don't be discouraged that you're not actually achieving perfection, because this is your mission. Your mission is to struggle. That is what brings Hashem joy, the struggle. Chapter 28 gave us a technique, which is basically to ignore the Yetzer Hara, like as if you would ignore a nudnik or a like one of these sales calls that you get on the phone, because those only come to you to serve as distracting thoughts while you are serving Hashem. So while you are serving Hashem, if you go through some distracting thoughts and you start getting upset about it, just ignore it. Ignore it completely, because what happens is that the animal soul becomes much more active when it sees you being involved in Avodas Hashem. So when you just ignore it, it will give up and go to other pastures. Chapter 29 began discussing the concept of a blockage of the heart, timtum halev. That is when the divine soul does not permeate. When the divine soul does not permeate the animal soul as a result of the very big amount of klipa, shell, surrounding the animal soul. And the solution that Tanya gives us is not to increase the light in this chapter, but actually to break apart the klipa, to become brokenhearted, much as one would chop up wood in order to ignite a fire. You break the arrogance of the animal soul in this chapter by thinking of its faults, again, at predetermined times and an emergency measure. Chapter 30, we learn how to not judge others, because judging others brings you to arrogance. You think, I'm better than them. And chapter 30 actually is continuing this theme of Timtum Alev, bringing you down a notch, explains to us that when we judge others, we have to remember that firstly, they are possibly fighting a greater battle than us. And also in other areas in our lives, such as the positive mitzvahs, we may have the same or even greater challenge than them. Now that brings us down a notch, which could cause depression. So that brings us to chapter 31, which gives us a solution for the depression, which is something called merirus. Merirus is bitterness, but not bitterness in the normal meaning of the term. Bitterness is something which you can turn momentary sadness into bitterness. Bitterness is action-oriented. It's recognizing your failings without falling into a depression and saying, I am going to do tshuva, which is very practical for this month, because instead of falling into depression, which is just exactly what the Yetzer Hara wants from us, we could actually say, yes, I'm a human being, I fail, but I'm going to turn that into action. I'm going to do tshuva with joy. And this is when the Beinoni actually begins to identify with his godly soul, because why are we doing tshuva with joy? Because we are actually redeeming the godly soul from the prison of the animal soul. And because the Beinoni starts identifying with the godly soul, that brings us to chapter 32, which brings us to the topic of loving a fellow Jew as one loves oneself, because we identify with our godly soul, and our bodies are what separate us, but not our souls. The origin of our souls is what unite us. We all have the same Father. Now, 33, what we did last week, what we learned last week, it actually addresses this potential sadness that could come about as a result of reflecting upon your spiritual failings and, and breaking the klippa, becoming brokenhearted, etc., and gives us a source of joy. A source of joy when we reflect upon the oneness or unity of God. When we reflect upon the unity of Hashem, we realize that we are actually a part of this unity, a part of this oneness of Hashem. We have a closeness and intimacy with Hashem, and we are a part of making this world a dwelling place for Hashem. So we feel tremendous joy. Not only in that, we also feel tremendous joy in Hashem's joy as a result of this avodah that we do. Now, 34, this chapter that we're going to do this week, takes this concept of feeling joy in Achdus Hashem, feeling joy as a result of oneness of God, and feeling a closeness and intimacy with Hashem, and really makes it practical. How do we do this? How do we actually elevate our entire lives and days to making in order to make a dwelling place for Hashem, in order to make a dwelling place for Hashem to feel comfortable? Now, our patriarchs, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they were considered to be a vehicle to Hashem's will. The actual term used in Zohar is that they were called a merkava. A merkava is a chariot. Well, in today's days, we don't really use a chariot. We use any kind of vehicle, and we can definitely use the term vehicle to explain what this meant, that they were a chariot towards Hashem's will. This means that they were constantly united in mind and soul with Hashem. They had no will of their own. They were complete harmony with the will of Hashem. Whatever Hashem's will was, that's what they did. Much the same as the car you drive, the train you go on, the airplane you fly. It doesn't have a will of its own. It simply fulfills the will of the person piloting or driving, etc. Those were the patriarchs. They were on a very, very high level. The prophets that came after them later on, the Nevi'im, they also were very united with Hashem, each one according to their level and understanding. And the greatest prophet of all was Moshe Rabbeinu, our master Moshe Rabbeinu. He was even higher than all of the prophets, because whereas for all of the prophets, Hashem revealed himself to the prophets in their mind and soul, Moshe Rabbeinu actually received Hashem's prophecy in his body. We know that it says that Shechina medaberes mitoich groino shel Moshe. The Shechina actually spoke through the throat of Moshe. When we say that the Shechina spoke through the throat of Moshe, Hashem was revealing himself in the body of Moshe. So Moshe Rabbeinu was a complete dwelling place for God. He was a host to godliness. And the other Nevi'im were also hosts to godliness in their way and in their level, maybe not as much as Moshe, but also very united with the will of Hashem. Now, what happened when we received the Torah? We received the Torah, firstly, directly from Hashem. Hashem started speaking the 10 commandments, and we were not, us limited human beings, were not able to tolerate this amount of godliness. We fainted. And thereafter, Moshe took over, and actually that was the first instance of when Hashem spoke through the throat of Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem spoke through Moshe Rabbeinu. But we were not able to tolerate Hashem's oneness completely, as the Avos did, as our patriarchs did, as Moshe Rabbeinu did, and as the rest of the prophets did. We actually fainted at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. And that is why, at the time of Har Sinai, and that is why the very first commandment that Hashem gave us after Har Sinai was to make a dwelling place for us, v'asuli mikdash, to go build the Mishkan. At that time, the Mishkan, firstly, it was the Mishkan. In later generations, it became a more permanent structure, the Beis HaMikdash. We were not able to host complete oneness of Hashem. We are limited human beings. So Hashem gave us a way to access that oneness and to feel that oneness in a revealed way, which was in the Mishkan and later in the Beis HaMikdash. That was a physical place in this world where Hashem's will was revealed. So if you weren't really feeling it, you just took a trip to the Beis HaMikdash and there you felt it. It was revealed. Even though Hashem is everywhere in this world, Hashem is not revealed everywhere. The Beis HaMikdash, the Mishkan, was a place where Hashem was revealed. However, nowadays we do not have the Mishkan. We don't have the Beis HaMikdash. After the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, where is the revelation of Hashem's oneness in this world? How can we access Hashem's oneness in this world in order to become a host to Hashem, in order to host Hashem in our dwelling places, in our homes, etc.? In the Daled Amos of Halacha, in the words of Halacha, that is where Hashem's Shekhinah is revealed nowadays. Now, it's very interesting because why Halacha? Firstly, why Halacha? Why the intricate laws of Yiddishkeit? Why is that the revelation of Hashem's Shekhinah in this world, of Hashem's oneness in this world? Because Halacha is found in Torah, and Torah is the Ratzon and Chachma of Hashem. It is the will and wisdom of Hashem, which is enclosed in all the halachas. Now, interestingly enough, I remember reading in a different sikha, not in this parak of Tanya, but halacha is so powerful. Sometimes one thinks of halacha as very limiting. There are lots of rules and regulations and do's and don'ts and details, and you can really, a person learning halacha for the first time will think to himself, wow, does Hashem really care about all these different details and specifications? And learning this parak of Tanya reminded me of a sikha that the Rebbe said in the times, very many years ago, I think in the 30s even, when a laser beam was invented. And the Rebbe compared halacha to a laser beam. The Rebbe said there are two different kinds of lights. One is the regular light, which we have in our homes. That light is expansive. It expands to fill the place that it is illuminating. It is not focused, it's expansive. A laser is such a focused light that it becomes so strong that it is strong enough even to cut metal. And the Rebbe compared the light of laser, to halacha. That laser is extremely focused. Have you ever heard the expression laser focused? Halacha is very focused. Do this, do that, limits, specifications, details. But it is so powerful that it enables us to cut through the wall of iron which separates us and our Father Hashem in heaven. So I just thought that was a very interesting part of a sikha to be brought here in this parak of Tanya. But halacha is where we find Hashem's oneness. So what should we do? How can we practically how can we practically make this world a dwelling place of Hashem when we are not the patriarchs, we are not the Nevi'im, we are not Moshe Rabbeinu? We are simple human beings, limited. Practically, how can we be a host to Hashem, making a mishkan for him practically? By studying Torah at fixed times. This parak of Tanya gives us a couple of practical tips. So first of all, number one, to study Torah at fixed times achieves something absolutely incredible. According to the time available to you. So let's say you have other things to do. You've got to run your house, you may have work, you have a business, whatever it is that you do with the rest of your day, but you have some time available. If you use that time available to you to study Torah, and you know in your mind that if more time becomes available, you will study more Torah. This is actually considered as if you are studying Torah all the time. In other words, by taking a fixed portion of time and dedicating that to the study of Torah and prayer, you are elevating the rest of the time, the rest of your day. And that's an amazing concept, because one could think to oneself, oh, well, we're not tzaddikim, we're not the avos, we can't dedicate our whole day to Torah study, but we actually can by setting aside fixed times to study Torah and knowing that if more time becomes available, we'll use that as well. It automatically elevates the rest of the time. And as a result, we will rejoice in being a host to Hashem and being a dwelling place to Hashem here in this world. You can also elevate the rest of your time, the rest of your day, and this is the second technique in Tanya, and it's very, very, very powerful in this chapter, when you are involved in business or earning money, by giving tzedakah from your earnings, even though you don't give your entire earnings away to tzedakah. You give a portion. So something over here is very, very interesting as it relates to women as well. You know, as women, we have three mitzvahs, three special mitzvahs, right? One of those mitzvahs is challah. This is a perfect example to show us how by consecrating a part of something, we make the whole holy. So when we have that challah dough, it's actually forbidden to be eaten until we take a part of that. And as in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, we gave it to the Kohen, and nowadays we burn it. But what are we doing? We are showing Hashem, our families, our children, that by elevating, by consecrating, by dedicating a portion of either our time or our money for godly pursuits, we elevate the rest. Now that challah, the challah dough becomes kosher to make challah. It becomes elevated, it becomes holy, it becomes challah, right? So the same way you can elevate your day, even though you are not giving more than a fifth of your earnings, right? Meiser is a tenth. If one has a lot of money, one is encouraged to give more, but up to a fifth of your earnings. You don't give more than chaimesh, a fifth, but this portion elevates all your money. Elevates all your money. And indeed, tzedakah represents one of Hashem's attributes. And right now in Chodesh Elul, Hashem's attributes of Rahmanis are the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim are revealed. And one of Hashem's attributes is Rachamim, Rachum, V'chanun, etc. Rahman is compassion, and we say to Hashem, as Hashem is compassionate, so we are also being compassionate to our fellow and helping him out with tzedakah. Human kindness thereby becomes an abode for divine kindness in turn. The mitzvah of tzedakah is so powerful that the Alter Rebbe tells us in this chapter that mitzvah tzedakah shekula keneged kol harkabonos. The mitzvah of tzedakah is equal to all of the karbonos that were brought in the Beis Hamikdash. What happened by a korban? When a person or the nation brought an offering to Hashem, brought a sacrifice to Hashem, all living creatures were elevated through the offering of one animal. See the theme? A portion elevates the whole. All plant life was elevated through the meal offering, which was flour and oil mixed. A portion elevates the whole. So tzedakah makes your entire day's work godly, thereby enabling you also to be a vehicle for Hashem's will, just like the others. By the way, also the Alter Rebbe adds, an additional note to how tzedakah and Torah study elevates your day, that during Torah study and davening, while you're davening and learning, all that you have eaten during the day also gets elevated, because you're using that energy, right, to daven, and you thereby you also elevate the other 4 parts of your earnings, because you used your money to buy that food. So very, very powerfully, practical techniques how to elevate our lives, our days, thereby making ourselves a dwelling place for Hashem in this world. Now, up till now, We've been discussing joy as a way of combating sadness as a potential result of spiritual failings. Joy because the soul is being released from exile. Joy because of the intimacy you feel with Hashem, the oneness of Hashem. Hashem's joy when we overcome the Sitra Achra. However, the Alter Rebbe does not want us to be in denial. It's a very interesting way that he ends this chapter. Don't be in denial, he tells us, because this joy that you feel does not contradict being humble or feeling brokenhearted over one's spiritual failings. Yes, it's true. We don't have to sit and be depressed the whole day long about our failings. We should concentrate and focus on the joy. But one needs to feel humble and brokenhearted in order to overcome Timtum Halev. At the same time, we have to feel joy in order to prevent the sadness over spiritual failings developing into a full-fledged depression, which then is the Yetzer Hara's work. How can both coexist? The Alter Rebbe tells us by defining the origin of the joy and the sadness, by defining the cause. So the cause of bitterness and sadness, that comes from the animal soul. But the cause for joy comes from the godly soul, which is why we are able to feel them concurrently at the same time. And that is why there is a statement in the Zohar that tells us that weeping is lodged in one side of the heart, joy in the other. Two opposite emotions stemming from separate causes can exist side by side. A beautiful, powerful, practical chapter of Tanya. Any questions, observations? It's a very short but powerful chapter. So I'm going to end the recording here.